order. Okay, welcome everyone to the St Andrews Union Debating Society, the oldest and some might say finest of its kind.
Yeah!
Okay, you're going to have to rally this week because there's fewer of you, so we're going to do it again, okay? So welcome to the St Andrews Union Debating Society, the oldest and some might say finest of its kind.
Yeah!
Wonderful, that's what we're after. Excellent, thank you very much. So the motion that stands before the House this evening is that this House believes we need more farmers. I'm delighted to announce some excellent speakers who have joined us this evening. So on the proposition we have Wendy Chamberlain and David Bean. And on the opposition, Matthew Steele and John Picken. Tonight's debate, I would like to invite our clerk Lewis to read last week's minutes in the style of Jeremy Clarkson.
Have a PowerPoint, it's very important.
This is brilliant. But I like this.
Point. This isn't Clarkson's farm, this is the debating society.
Counterpoint, this is St Andrews. Most people haven't seen a farm anyway.
There seems to be some disagreement in the House. Ooh. We shall have to take a vote. Not yet. We shall have to take a vote by oral acclamation. Ooh. There we go. All those in favour of taking the minutes as read, say aye.
Aye.
All those against, nay.
Nay.
It seems rather close. I shall have to consult with my sergeant. Ines? Aye. The minutes are taken as read.
Resign.
Might be. Wonderful. So without further ado, I would like to invite the first proposition speaker, Wendy Chamberlain, to kick off tonight's debate. Here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. This is the first time I've been here since the general election in July, which indeed prevented me from coming in September, though I believe Alex Cole-Hamilton sort of ably replaced me at that event. But the proposition today is that we need more farmers, and I'm very conscious with the excellent speakers that we have this evening on both sides. I should say I feel very inadequate to be starting this debate and speaking in favour of the motion, when it's quite clear that the other speakers are far more knowledgeable than I am on farming. But I do have to say that I do have some farming ancestry. My father is from Argyllshire and my grandfather was a shepherd, and his granduncles, there were 10 of them, I descend from their single sister, had a number of farms in the Kyles of Bute and around the Cowal Peninsula, with fantastic names such as Uchgail and Uchnal Davori, which apparently means Lady of the Yellow Wheat. I also, prior to the election as the MP in 2019, worked for Diageo, and they are obviously very concerned with barley and wheat. So I'm going to put that in for my defence as well. But this motion, I think to me, sounds like a motion that it would be obvious to support. But I'm sure that I will be interested in hearing what those on the other side have to say. But I'm sure all of us will be able to agree that farming, agriculture, our natural and rural environments are incredibly supportive. So for my side, why do we believe, and therefore urge this House to believe this evening, that we need more farmers? And I would start by saying that farmers are the custodians of our natural environment. As a politician in Westminster, we discuss issues such as net zero, and I firmly believe that protect our nature and deliver net zero, we need to work with farmers and not against them. We need to harness the knowledge, the skills, the heritage that they have in order to be able to deliver those goals that we need to do in our place in the world, but to do so without damaging the culture and heritage of our rural communities. And part of how we do that is because the intrinsic motivation of farmers, in my view, is to produce food, and therefore we need to help them to do that. But I think I also want to mention that in so many rural areas, farmers are at the heart of them, not just in relation to the land itself, but their wider associations with friends and neighbours and the other industries that they support, the voluntary work and doing favours for people that makes up so much of what makes rural life special, even if it is not so often easy.
Point of information.
I'm happy to accept a point of information.
Would the proposition say that local community spirit would solely come from farmers, or could it come from farm workers, shepherds, shopkeepers, grocers, and so on? It doesn't need to exclusively come from farmers.
Absolutely, I accept the note from the opposition, and I would say that yes, it does, but I do think farmers are at the heart of that, and without farms there are no farm workers, there are no people working more widely in agriculture, there are no shopkeepers with local goods in order to have them. So as a result, I think farmers are at the heart of it, even though there's so many that do so much to help our rural communities.
Supplementary.
I'm happy to accept a supplementary.
The tourism industry in the west coast of Scotland is arguably bigger than farming.
I would say that not only is it might be arguably bigger than farming, but I would also say that farmers actually are heavily involved, increasingly so, in the tourism industry, that they have side businesses because they are entrepreneurs, they are creative, they have a good head for business, and therefore they're able to deliver more businesses, including tourism as part of that. But I just wanted to mention that I know personally, as the MP for Northeast Fife, food banks here in Northeast Fife, the fact that we need food banks is a source of great regret, but they are supported by local farmers who often donate fresh produce to them, and that is very important. But let me turn to some facts. 55% of the food that we eat currently is produced in the UK. And I would argue that that is not nearly enough of a percentage for a country that should be interested and concerned in food security. I'd also argue from a more wider perspective that where we are taking food from abroad, we're potentially taking it from countries, developing countries, the global south, etc., where we're actually potentially taking food away from the most vulnerable. And we should be thinking about that as well when we are thinking about how we produce our food. We need to change that, and several years ago I remember the Fife diet that specifically encouraged people to reduce food miles and eat locally as much as possible, and the farmers markets here in St Andrews, at Bow House over in the East Neuk and elsewhere are very important for that rural and local produce. But that 55% is a worryingly low number. Now we could become what Liz Truss wanted us to be, and via the market become a large importer of food. But I believe that that is wrong for a number of reasons. The Scottish Agricultural Survey in 2023 shows a static workforce, but a downturn of 7% in working occupiers. Exactly the type of farming, those family farms, that we as a country in Scotland and elsewhere in the UK have long excelled at, and that is at the core of our rural geography. And it's reported in that same survey that the majority of our farmers are owners or occupiers, i.e. renting or owning the land that they work and living there, and indeed giving employment to others. In the statistics, 65% of those are men, and only 16% of them are under 45, with the largest age group, 36%, being aged over 65. Now, if that's not a compelling argument for the proposition this evening, and the argument that we need more farmers, I don't know what is.
Point of information.
I'm happy to accept a point of information.
I'm sure you'll agree on the proposition that those figures can be incredibly misleading. It's like asking any business owner, be it a builder, a shopkeeper, the head of Tesco, the ones that are leading the companies tend to be much older. It's very rare that you get a 29-year-old CEO of a FTSE 100 company. So I would take this with a pinch of salt. These figures, that all farmers are old, male and stale. They're not.
Thank you very much to the opposition for the point of order. Obviously this is the Scottish Agricultural Survey that is produced by the Scottish Government, but what it does talk about more widely is a static workforce. I'm talking about the 7% decline that we've seen in owner-occupiers, but actually the workforce is not increasing too, and that surely is something, if we're only producing 55% of our food, that we need to consider. And I want to commend the work, and hopefully the opposition will be pleased with this, the Scottish Association of Young Farmers, with 70 clubs across Scotland, and who I previously met at the Highland Show in my time in Scottish Affairs Committee. They do a huge amount to bring young farmers together, to support them with work and development, but also to support their mental health as well. But I was conscious this evening at dinner before we came here that I was being asked about my working week as an MP, and yes, my hours are long, but I know that farming is not a 9-to-5 job either, and holidays are limited, i.e. close to zero, and there are challenges, and that is one of the things that we need to think about when we're encouraging more farmers. We need to think about how we diversify the industry, how we potentially support, but also so that we don't lose the good things that we know we value. And farming is obviously changing, and technology is a part of that. And just earlier this year I was at the National Robotarium based at Heriot-Watt University, where one of their spin-off start-offs is a crover, which looks like a small rugby ball but turns grain in storage automatically, rather than potentially the big poles that farmers have used to use in the past when they are looking at grain. It's good for health and safety as well, because that's one of the other challenges in farming. Health and safety, risk of injury is higher than in other industries. So I hope the opposition to this motion will find much that we can agree with, but it's clear to me that we do need to see an increased number of farmers, both by encouraging people to potentially stay in the sector, but also attracting new people, Jeremy Clarkson or otherwise. But the reality is that we are currently facing a range of factors that do exactly the opposite. There is no doubt that our departure from the EU, regardless of what you think about that decision, has had an impact on farming. I've been involved in several conversations with the last government, and I'm looking forward to doing so again with the new government, around seasonally agricultural workers, funding changes and the impact of trade deals. I'm currently working with the Farmers Guardian around changes to the tax credit system that means farmers are now moving on to universal credit, which is just simply a benefit that's not set up and recognises farming. We need to think about climate change, and I commend the work that's happening in the River Eden following the flooding in Cooper to do so. But we need to think about that diversification and supporting those different businesses that farmers own it. And I hope the Liberal Democrats, our policy in the general election was an extra $1 billion for farming with the appropriate consequentials for Scotland. Without that support, we will not see more farmers, and we need them. I commend this motion to the House.
Fine speech, and now invite the first speaker for the opposition, John Picken. Hear, hear.
Thank you for inviting me to speak, Madam President, and the St Andrews Debating Society. The motion that this House believes that we need more farmers. It's a great honour and privilege to be here tonight debating such a heartfelt motion. And I'm going to be highlighting some of the important factors affecting the industry, and we are going to be discussing the food challenges farmers face in a world that prioritises the false headlines and pushes an ignorant but popular narrative. Challenges like land use, economic pressure, demographic shifts, and supermarket power in the supply chain. It's very interesting to see how others see us. Farmers and the proposers of the motion are in denial and have offered a Jeremy Clarkson view of farming. Farming is a struggle. My father gave me a poem to help me understand what a farmer must deal with. Any fool can be a farmer. In fact, it helps no end to be a little crazy and halfway round the bend. It's not essential to be crackers, good gracious, not at all. But it's no good being normal as you're climbing up the wall. If you can't meet these requirements, no need to break your heart, because you'll quickly get the hang of things once you get a start. If the weather doesn't beat you, it'll be an awkward yow, or a brainless politician, or an old demented cow, or a collie dog that's useless, one that drives you quite insane. But you'll get there if you're lucky, and you'll never feel the pain. You'll have diseases in your barley and pigeons in your wheat, temperamental old machinery, and a Labrador in heat. But by now you'll be conditioned, and you'll accept that you're just mad, and you'll never swap the townie for his posh suburban pad. Let him keep his index pension and his room without a view, but be sure to marry someone who is crazy, just like you. As a farmer, you have to be fiercely independent and self-sufficient and deal with all the day-to-day issues that happen as in that poem. So the definition of a farmer is a person who owns or manages a farm. I'm a Scottish farmer, I own my farm. My name is Farmer John, and I'm learning new techniques all the time. Robotic machines, GPS controlled, social media to promote our farming businesses. Claire, my daughter, has returned home to take over the running of the tourist business, and myself from my wife. We have worked hard all our life and produced wheat and barley for whisky, oats for porridge, all from local firms like PepsiCo, Macallan and Diageo distilleries, and provide luxury holiday breaks for our many loyal guests. Allowing the necessary succession planning through diversification to maintain the farm as a viable unit. 15 years ago, Maggie and I invested in our own farm self-catering accommodation, St Andrews Coach Houses, that my wife Maggie set up and runs. Claire has now planned for a solar farm to make us entirely self-sufficient of electricity. And the profits from carefully researched diversification subsidise the traditional farming enterprises, attracting such family members back to the home unit. Like my daughter Claire, she is replacing Maggie and I, but not increasing the number of farmers. We do not need more farmers. Farming has changed, and there are many more opportunities. I've been farming since I was 12 years old. I have always been passionate about what I do. It's been my life's ambition and still is. My father and his father before him were all farmers, and I wanted to be like my dad, have rough hands, get dirty, wear Wellington boots and wear a boiler suit. There is far more to farming than that, but we definitely don't need more.
On a point of information.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Speaker, while the Speaker's family situation is clearly very welcome in that he has people who are prepared to follow him into his profession, does he not recognise that there are many family farms that are actually falling out of business because sadly the children wanting to take over just aren't there?
Well, I'll deal with that further on, but yes, there is a point where succession becomes a necessary thing. But the scale of farming is the important issue. And with scale and modern margins, we tend to find that it chases farmers away from farming. My father employed 5 full-time people, 2 herdsmen and 3 tractormen. And until recently, I employed 1 tractorman and farmed 3 times his original area. My 1 tractorman drove much bigger tractor, much bigger plough, and got through the work in better timing conditions, resulting in higher yields. This is progress, this is science, this is what we do as farmers. We do not need more farmers, we just need recognition and help to progress. 800 years ago, William Wallace raced across Fife with his band of outlaws to sack Cooper Castle. In his day, there were less than 500,000 people in Scotland. Now there are more than 10 times that number. People went hungry then. And in his time, there were several starvation events, and food was grown by many more farmers than there is today. They did not have fertiliser or sprays, so production was uncertain and so dependent on the weather, the sunshine, the rain, the temperature, which are all so variable yet necessary. Climate change was happening then too. It was getting colder and crops failed. So 800 years on, there are fewer farmers, only 30,000 in Scotland, but with modern efficient use of inputs, we boost the yield. The variables of weather, the flood, the drought events that happen, they're not as important as they were then because of the more efficient use of the inputs. So the number of farmers is irrelevant to the production of the staple food needed for the community. We do not need more farmers. Consider today in 2024, you probably weren't aware, but we've just had the worst harvest, the 3rd worst harvest in the last 100 years. And it was not because we have fewer farmers, it was because the land area used for cereal, vegetable and fruit growing was at an all-time low because of government policy, coupled with the atrocious unseasonal weather. And it's rewilding that is responsible for the resilience, the reliance of imported food, which is 84% in fruit, and vegetables 44% are imported. And it's rewilding that takes away the control of the land from the farmer to where governments dictate its use for its own whims. In the case of today, it's to feed the birds, with thousands of acres of wildflower mixtures sown instead of cereals, fruit and vegetable, and that would feed the people. In Scotland, we're forced to have 5% of our productive land to grow food for birds. It has been as high as 25% when we were in the EU, so it's no wonder that we're only 58% self-sufficient in the food that we would replace. We do not need more farmers. Every time there's an agricultural review of the last 30 years has resulted in the reduction of production, which means that they import more food from third world countries and others that do not have wages laws, health and safety laws, environmental and animal welfare laws. These all add huge costs to the production inputs of our food. Imports are much cheaper. So how can you allow this to happen? And we import unregulated produce. Our price is set in how much little the produce can be imported for, and that's the price in Scotland that we get offered. This also reduces food security to a dangerously low level and reduces the number of farmers because they can't make money because the price received is below the cost of production. So we do not need more farmers. They are being forced out of business. DEFRA has estimated that there will be 20% less farmers by 2030. I hear you say that farmers are paid subsidies to protect our prices. Well, let me tell you that supermarkets take the value of our subsidy and take it off the price offered so they can maintain their control over farmers and maintain their huge profits and deliver cheap food, which is still the only government food policy in force today. Farming has suffered from high inflation rates well above those seen in the high streets. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to close by thanking you for your time, but ask you to support your local farmers, however many there may be in the future. The proposers of the motion have not shown that there is a need or wish to desire to increase the number of farmers, and food is essential to life. We could not survive without it. Fresh, wholesome, local food. It has travelled less miles, better for the environment, better for the consumer, and better for farmers. Did you know that a chicken from Tesco that feeds 4 is the same price as a cup of coffee from the Black Sheep coffee shop in Market Street? There is something wrong in that. Let's focus on empowering farmers we already have by addressing the core problems rather than expanding the number of farmers. We do not need more farmers. I strongly oppose the motion.
And now hand over to David Bean to continue the debate this evening. Hear, hear.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and what an honour and a privilege it is for me to return to this House.
Hear, hear.
Having sat in Madam Speaker's own chair a little over 20 years ago in that role, and I know, Madam Speaker, the burdens that can come upon a person in your position. I also, if you will allow me some more moments of reminiscence, remember one of my first times in this House where I met a young woman about 22, 23 years ago who now sits in the front row here. Next year, Madam Speaker, she and I are to be married. So it took us a bit of time, but we got here eventually. And just while we're on the looking back track, I also want to take a few moments to acknowledge the fact that this is the first debate that this House has seen since the death of Alex Salmond. Now, I was not of Alex Salmond's politics. However, I had met him. He had a history, a tradition within this House. He and I judged a schools debate here together. And I think that regardless of the politics of anyone in this House, the question as to whether or not he was a towering figure in Scottish politics need not be asked, because the answer is clear. So I would like to pay brief respects to Mr. Salmond. Now, when we proceed to engage in this debate, I think, rather like my partner, Ms. Chamberlain, in being invited to speak in this debate and being told the motion, I wasn't entirely sure what the opposition line was going to be. And I do thank Mr. Picken for clarifying matters somewhat, because we all know the importance of food and farming as a sector. We all know, in the words of Gareth Wynne Jones, that while a person might need a doctor once a month, once a year, while they might need a fireman once in their lifetime if they are unlucky, every single one of us in this house or anywhere needs a farmer 3 times every day. So the question is, how do we oppose that? How do we oppose farming? Well, I didn't want it to get down to a dry debate about numbers. You know, how many more farmers do we need? We need 5% more, 10% more. Can we do with 5% fewer, 10% fewer? Mr. Picken, as I say, has clarified matters somewhat because he's brought us a few arguments there from the opposition side of the debate which suggests that while the opposition is going to acknowledge the importance of food and farming, they don't think that a bold proposition that we need more farmers now is going to be something that will be helpful to the sector. And I think that he said a lot that had some merit to it. It is true that productivity within farming has increased immeasurably over so many other years. It is true that the pinnacle of the profession of someone who goes into the farming sector will be to be called a farmer. And yes, you can't necessarily expect to reach the pinnacle of your profession, whatever it is, within 5 minutes or even just a few years of entering it. But I think he overreached himself, Madam Speaker, when he said that the number of farmers is irrelevant, because frankly, that could not be true. Just think about it for a few moments, ladies and gentlemen. How is it that we could maintain the current volumes of food production from our food and farming sector if it were irrelevant how many people there were running farms? It simply does not make sense, I contend. How could we manage to maintain that amount of food production while reducing the number of farmers? Well, the answer is quite clear. We would move from the sort of model that we have here in Scotland, here in the United Kingdom, to something more like the model they have in the United States of America, where they have seen massive amounts, massive degrees of consolidation within land, where small family farms effectively no longer exist anymore, because all of that land has been parcelled up, it's been shoved together, and it's been mechanized and it's been agrochemicalized out of all recognition. That's how you maintain food production without maintaining farmer numbers. And I would like to suggest, Madam Speaker, that that is not a road that we in the United Kingdom, in Scotland, ought to be going down. Why do I say this? Well, because there are downsides from doing that, ladies and gentlemen. The reason why we are so concerned about imports of food substituting for domestic production is that, unfortunately, whether it be by environmental standards or whether it be by animal welfare standards, the quality of the food that we would be capable of importing at such cheaper rates to substitute for the domestic production that we would be otherwise foregoing is so much lower. Now, I'm proud, Madam Speaker, and I think we can all be proud of the fact that the United Kingdom, and Scotland within it, has the highest standards of food production in the world. The best standards of animal welfare, the best environmental standards. And I think that that is something that we should be celebrating. But the reason why it is possible to produce food to these higher standards is because we haven't gone down the same road that they have in the United States of America. Now, Mr. Picken pointed out that domestic production is at risk from imports because it's done more expensively. But that's the reason why. It's because we are maintaining those standards. And British food and farming, the way that it gets ahead as a sector is not by competing on price. It's by competing on quality. And in many cases, farmers and farming businesses are finding that one way that they can build up their income is by internal diversification. So if, for example, you're a dairy farmer and you've got a herd, instead of just selling milk out at the farm gate and paying those prices, a lot of these places are setting up creameries, they're setting up yogurt making facilities, they're setting up ice cream factories, and we're seeing this.
For your information?
Yes, sir, please.
I mean, it's a well-known fact, sadly, that the supermarkets are 87% of the market, and especially in milk. They all have their contract farmers, and they give the contract farmer the highest price possible, so that is quoted in the press. Meanwhile, they buy the majority of their milk from the open market, which is at less than 40% of that price. They are not driving forward standards, they are deriding the number of farmers who are going bust to this day.
So I entirely agree with you about the problem that's being experienced here. I think part of the solution is what the newly elected UK government is committed to doing, which is strengthening the groceries code adjudicator. That's only part of it. However, the reason why that is a problem, sir, I would put to you, is because milk is effectively being traded as a commodity in that regard. And I think what we need to do is to get away from commoditization, and that's why I've been talking about, for example, farms internally setting up their own options on farm to add additional value to their product by not just selling it out at the gate as milk, which, as you rightly point out, is you have a supplementary.
Supplementary, please, supplementary. It's a well-known fact also by the Consumer Association, who are doing surveys all the time, that the general public go to farmers' markets, go to farm shops. It's less than 2% of the market. And even though you are encouraging farmers to go out there and shorten the supply chain from field to fork or glass, it's just not a volume that will make a difference.
So I'm not merely suggesting that farmers sell their products at farmers' markets, useful though that might be to a certain part of the market. What I'm suggesting is that there is value in adding value, I suppose I should say, to the product that is manufactured on the farm. You know, numerous of the farms who've managed to do this have actually built up brands where they're selling their product, which has a reputation for that quality, into local shops and into supermarkets. So you're not just reliant on that small proportion of the population who are prepared to go and pay higher prices for a basic product at a farmer's market. So I think we are drawing to the close of my time here. I want to thank you all, Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, for taking the time to listen to me. But while we will have time after the floor debate for further summation, I would argue that there will always be a need for more farmers because too many farmers are leaving the sector. They need to be replaced. We need a thriving farming sector to continue. And with that, I beg to continue our proposition of this motion.
Contribution, and now invite our final speaker, Matthew Steele, to continue the debate. Hear, hear.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I would also like to say what a pleasure it is to be back in this hall this evening. The last time I was here was in 2010 in the final of a Courier Schools debating competition.
Yeah.
When I was 14 years old. David perhaps judged some of them. Unfortunately now I'm probably twice the size with half the hair, but I may be more fun. So nonetheless, it's incredibly good to be back here. And I unfortunately am nowhere near as polished and as prepared as the other speakers this evening. I have been far too busy lifting potatoes today, so I just had to scribble some notes down. So I'll just get in my excuses first. But I think that opposition should win this debate for one reason only tonight, and that we are the turkeys voting for Christmas on this thing. So I think you should get rid of us. We're obviously not very intelligent people. Get us out of the gene pool. No more farmers like John and I. Maybe a bit savage, but you get my point. We're maybe not the most bright people in the world. So then how did I come to be here? Well, we're from a family farm, I just happened to run it. My grandfather, and Wendy was asking me earlier, I suppose started it. He started off direct retailing in and around Glasgow. Always had an ambition to get up to Angus, eventually ended up in Angus, and we have farming interests in Angus as well as Canada. Now growing potatoes, rearing chickens for eggs, as well as some renewable energy prospects. So my grandfather worked incredibly hard to get up to Angus, and here I am in Fife. So there's, every coin has two sides. So yeah, I'm used to debating at school. It's a long time ago. I was used to 5 or 6 minutes, so we'll try 10. First of all, John, a proposition, great arguments. We'll deal with it in the summation. Afterwards, John, I didn't realise you moonlighted as a poet as well. That was absolutely gorgeous. But it seems to me, before I go into my substantive argument, that there was a couple of main themes that emerged. So we had the theme of community, we had food security, and we had this kind of idealistic view from the second proposition speaker of farmers going straight to market, which is admirable, honourable, but nonetheless idealistic and unrealistic. And there seemed to be this idea in the food security issue that more farmers would equal more food. Unfortunately, more farmers does not equal more land. We will produce more food by being more efficient. History has told us that the bigger farms are more efficient. It's a fact. Lots and lots of people trying to do their own thing across small areas is incredibly inefficient, and I will come on to points to back up that argument in my debate. So I have to deal with something really glaring first, is that the proposition didn't actually define the motion. The first opposition speaker did. So farmers, as I see it, are owns or manages a farm. That tends to be what we describe as farmers in Western society. My hands are not exactly farmer hands. I'm classed as a farmer in Company's House because that is just the public's view of me. So I'll come on to why that's important later on, but it's very important that that's what we define as a farmer, is somebody who owns or manages land in this debate. So my first point is on the history of where more farmers didn't necessarily work. The first example I'm going to have to go to is Russia. So they got rid of the farmers after the communist revolution, and they went to collective farming. So everybody got I'm speaking to people who don't know all about this, but everybody got a very small piece of ground. This was a direct factor which led to the Soviet famine 1930 to 1933, where roughly 5.7 to 8.7 million people died. It's something I googled in the office in my 5 minutes, and could have indirectly led to the Holodomor in Ukraine, which is a country that is very close to my own heart at the minute. And it was only when the large state farms came in later on in the SSSR that the food efficiency went up, and Russia went up to about 100 million tonnes of food and was a big exporter. Then it collapsed again when Yeltsin got in the 90s, and back up to being a big exporter again. So that was where there was lots and lots of farmers, a very tangible link to the motion, I would say, and it led to mass starvation, and that is, I think it's very easy for us to say in a country that has not been hungry since the Second World War to play fast and loose with food production and idealisms, but until you're hungry, I would say that we do not need more farmers on that front. The second country, in fact I'm going to actually mention Ukraine. I've been in and out of Ukraine a few times over the past couple of years, and they still had very small patches of ground, and there is actually a farmer from Angus, not too far from me, who went into Ukraine in the late noughties, and is basically, he's a big farmer, very efficient. What's happening is all these individual landholders are letting ground out to him because they couldn't produce anything from it. Nothing that resembled a living. They all had jobs elsewhere. And this large farmer has come in and made it very efficient, given these people livelihoods, given them living so that they can send their kids to university and live a good standard of life. And that was because of economies of scale and efficiencies and good knowledge and being able to pay for the right consultants around him. It's easy to pay for one consultant when you're a very big farmer. It's very expensive to pay for many, many consultants when you're all individual farmers. The next country I'll come to is France. I actually went to study tour in France a couple of summers ago when I was chair of the Next Gen committee at NFUS. And I'd like to caveat that none of the views expressed this evening are those of NFUS. So in France, farms get split evenly between the offspring. So what basically farms are split up, they become smaller and smaller because there's this very idealistic view. It's admirable, it's great, but it doesn't really work in practice. What we found in Normandy was that there's young farmers getting huge grants to go back into farming. And this was great, this is why we were here. We were here to see how these guys were making a go of it as the next gen coming into agriculture. I don't want to tar everything with the same brush, but it's been a bit of a disaster. The people we spoke to did not enjoy it. One of them was working, and it was quite emotional actually. He was working all hours of the day and making no money. And young farmers in northern France have some of the highest suicide rates in Western Europe. So, do we really want more people to go into this profession at that scale? I would argue not, from that perspective alone. And I'll throw the second proposition speaker. The third country I'm going to come to is Sri Lanka, because it's quite important to mention Sri Lanka, where they had this idealistic view of food production. They went organic, and the government came down the next year. So that's all I'm going to say on that, is that but we must learn from history. There's a lot to learn from history. My second point is the retailer processor power, which John alluded to as well. I spent a year with Tesco in a graduate programme. I deal with supermarkets on a monthly basis, I would say. They are not incredibly nice people. They can be very fair people. They've come a long way in the last 10 years, I would say, just in case they're watching. But they are there to run businesses. And the bigger you are as a supplier, the more power you have. You're never going to be bigger than Tesco or Asda or Sainsbury's. But it is very, very difficult to cajole lots and lots of different people into thinking the same way and going into a negotiation. It's easier if there are fewer of you. And take that from experience. And profitable farmers, Darwinism, they tend to be better business people. They know their costs, they're more professional. I've been eaten alive before in a meeting with these guys because I didn't know the cost of something. And I came out with potatoes on my face in that instance. And it didn't come into it, but the bigger, more profitable farms, it's happened in England already. We're less likely to rely on subsidies going forward, which is more money for things like the NHS and so on and so forth. The third point, the third main theme, and is there a clock somewhere?
Yeah, you've got about a minute left.
All right, thanks. Is the food security. So this is going to be a positive note, and it's to do with the image problem around agriculture. We need a more diverse range of people working within agriculture. Saying farmer immediately makes it exclusive because of the connotations. You'll all be glad to know that I have a wide range of tweed. My whole family drive Land Rovers. But when I said to my careers advisor at school that I wanted to be a farmer, I was actively discouraged from doing it because of the connotations that we have with farming. We need to get away from the word farmer. We do not need more farmers. We need more biologists. People who are concerned with the production of food. And that can be scientists, agronomists, vertical farmers. We are going to have a much bigger population in 40 years. We need to get creative about how we produce more food off of less land. There's roughly 2,000 acres a day being lost in the US to development. There's ground here being lost to rewilding, development. I don't know the figures on it. It wasn't easily accessible on Google. But we are going to have to be creative about how we do this. And that creativity doesn't necessarily come from farmers. So for those reasons put forward by myself and the other opposition speaker, I beg you to oppose. Thank you.
Contribution and to all of our speakers this evening for what I think we all can agree has been a very interesting debate so far. I will say it's been a long time since we've had poetry and POIs in these debates, so thank you very much for bringing that back, very much appreciated. So this is the time of the evening when we welcome speeches from the floor. If you've not been with us for one of these debates before, that means that anybody in attendance can stand and speak for up to 2 minutes normally. This evening we are running very tight for time, so we're going to cut it back to 1 minute speeches, and I will cut you off after that 60 minutes is up. 60 minutes? 60 seconds! 60 seconds. So, any speeches from the floor, please raise your hand. I do believe there is a prize this week, £15 Newport Bakery voucher. Very coveted, very coveted. Very good pastries. So, without further ado, any speeches from the floor this evening? Any non-board speeches to start off with? Yes, just here. Please stand and state your name for the minutes.
Hi, my name is Hugo. Thank you, speakers, for giving us this amazing debate. I have 60 seconds, I'll be fast. So I'm going to start with opposition, and so obviously farmers will inevitably, more farmers will help crop yield and solve the fruit problem, but however, I think there are other obviously important factors that can also help with all this kind of stuff, such as precision agriculture technologies, soil enrichment technologies, crop rotation strategies, drought-resistant crops, and probably one of the most interesting ones, I think, is that genetic modification to make plants themselves yield more. So there's an enzyme in plants called rubisco. It's known to be one of the most abundant enzymes in the world, and it's useless. It's terrible at its job. It's like 30% efficient. And there is loads of research going on now that we can make this enzyme a lot better, and that will actually up the crop yield by 70% without actually doing anything to soil, number of farmers, any other stuff. It's kind of just a genetic modification technique that will just be a one-time injection into all plants, and hopefully that will solve the problem. Thank you very much.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Hugo. Any other speeches from the floor? Yes, just here. Please state your name for minutes.
Okay. So basically, first off, saying like the proposition, they said third world countries, when you import food to third world countries, their economy dies. And I'd like to thank one of the opposition speakers for bringing up Sri Lanka, because I am from Sri Lanka. What happened was we had a ban on non-organic fertilizers, and what happened is we couldn't make food and we couldn't export food, and that basically tanked the economy. And the second claim I'd like to make is the fact that the opposition the main point of the opposition is that even with the current number of farmers, there's things like say very low yields, crop yields, and seasonal things that prevent current farmers from surviving. So if you add more farmers to the mix, what's going to happen is because as a byproduct of capitalism, people are going to cut costs. All these benefits thought of by proposition saying, there's going to be economic benefits, there's going to be less climate change, maybe carbon emissions. What happens is maybe this could be curtailed by this very fact that no disrespect meant, but farmers could cut costs when there's more. Thank you.
Yes, Ksenia.
Firstly, thank you everybody for your wonderful speeches. I wanted to bring us back to a bit of what the motion is asking, which is, do we need more farmers specifically? Both sides have presented compelling arguments, but I'd like to make a stand for the proposition, specifically on your example actually about the United States. In the United States, we actually do have quite a lot of farmers. The point is right now, but unfortunately, they operate in a system that is run by monopolies. You see people entering the system and being immediately absorbed by these major corporations who force them to work grueling hours, keep their livestock in horrible conditions, invest in somewhat unnecessary at times feeding pens that actually lead to worse quality livestock and worse quality lives for farmers. It is no surprise that in the United States, chicken farmers in the Midwest have one of the highest suicide rates of all professions as well, as I'm sure as you guys have mentioned, for other farming and agricultural sectors. But why do I think that this is actually different in Scotland? Currently, we've seen it right now that in Scotland there is a thriving, non-monopolistic farmer economy. At least that is what has been presenting at this time. I'm sorry if I'm getting some of the facts wrong. And to see these farms continue, we need people to continue working for them. We need people to continue investing in them. Now, and right now, as the proposition has clearly stated, there are more people leaving this field. So if we do not see a new input of farmers, unfortunately I fear that we might see Scotland turn into a world that is much more similar to the United States, which I would not like to see in the farming sector especially. Thank you.
Yes, just here, please stand and state your name for the minutes.
Hello, my name is Eli. I would like to make a speech in support of the opposition, and I think that given the current Labour government's housing targets of 1.5 million new homes by the end of this Parliament, coupled with the proposed planning reforms from the Housing Secretary, which would free up 150,000 hectares of housing space to build up to 4 million new homes, much of which would be on greenbelt, of which 65.5% is made up of agricultural land. I think that it's imperative that farms become more efficient rather than trying to simply create more quantity rather than quality. I think that it's imperative to the survival of British and Scottish agriculture that we use the land that we have to its utmost efficiency rather than seeking to just create more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eli. Any other speeches from the floor before we go to board? No. Okay, Ariel.
Right, to the annoyance of my fellow board members, I'm going to bring up the fact that I'm from New Zealand and from farm.
Who knew?
Right, I come from a family of beef and sheep farming, and the big issue in New Zealand is mental health of farmers. We have extreme isolation rates, extreme poverty rates, because farming is actually not that lucrative despite it being the main industry of New Zealand. It is underfunded, dearly mishandled by government environmental policies that seem to punish farmers even though cities are the biggest polluters in New Zealand. Now, I think this is actually very similar to Scotland, but I do tend to favour the opposition because the issue right now is that we need more farmers to be supported and we need bigger farming networks, i.e. farm hands, electrical, shepherds, back home sharers are a huge shortage. We need more seasonal workers to be available on farms. Farmers themselves actually need more control of their own land. They need more support to deal with big monopolies. And they also just in general need more support to deal with the terrible mental health crises and financial crises faced in the industry, because I don't want no new farmer to join, considering it's a bloody dire place to be right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to Ariel. Almost speech to Mia.
Hello, I'd like to thank all the speakers for the debate that's happened so far and direct a couple of remarks to the table at large, mainly on the proposition. I just want to say, unfortunately, having more farmers would actually make worse the situation that you outline. More farmers means more competition between these farmers, and this forces a race to the bottom in the price. This enables companies like the ABCDs to force the farmers to sell their goods at lower costs. Having more farmers won't stop John Deere from building in clauses which mandate the repair of their machinery by only the mechanics which they have deemed acceptable. It won't stop chemical giants like Monsanto from polluting our environment and poisoning our animals, as mentioned in a previous floor speech. We just can't have a situation in which more farmers are using these same systems that are being corrupted and monopolised by organisations which seek to harm environments and harm our food production. Having more farmers doesn't prevent this. We need better regulation of companies to improve productivity and recruitment, given that improving the situation within the industry is the only way we'll be able to recruit more people to it in the future. But on opposition, quickly, to not let them all get off too lightly. Opposition undercut their own case by talking about all the harms associated with farming while also saying that we don't need new farmers. Only by telling us how we are able to solve the issues intrinsic to farming are we able to get more productivity. Because if farmers are suffering from a mental health crisis accurately characterised through all of these speeches, we have to first solve that before we're able to get any level of appropriate productivity.
Okay, thank you to Mia. We do have time for just one more. Would anybody else like to give a contribution from the floor this evening? Yeah, absolutely.
So for the minutes, my name is Dr. Kylie Murray, alumna in English 2005. I would just like to record that I thought every single speaker this evening was marvellous. And is there some way that we could all agree and disagree? So is there a way in which maybe farms could be divided up into productivity versus huggability? I mean, if you had surplus land, could you just put some lolpackers, aka alpacas, on it and have a big cuddle? Because surely there must be a way in which the four forces of nature around this evening's table could actually meet in the middle and everybody could be empowered and leave feeling better than when they arrived. Thank you for making us so welcome this evening, Mr. Bean and my good self. And it's great to see that the Debating Society here, 20 years after we were last in this chamber together, is still flourishing.
Hear, hear! Yeah. Everybody who contributed from the floor this evening. We will announce the winner of the Best Floor Speech Prize at the end of the debate, along with who was won. So we're now going to return to the table, and each side has 10 minutes to divide between you as you see fit. We go in reverse order, so we'll be starting with the opposition. Have you decided how you'd like to divide your time this evening?
Yeah, I'll go start.
If you want to do 4 or 5.
I'll do 4 or 5.
Yeah, that's good.
So splitting the time between the two of you?
Yeah, split the time.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. Who's speaking first?
The poet. Yeah.
The poet! Wonderful poet, everybody!
Well, we could have another go at another poem, but I feel that the mood has been set up so that we actually have to continue with the banter. Banter is a very good favourite word, and it happens every 25th of January. And Ravi Burns and fair for you on his face. I mean, it's just springs eternal. However, tonight is a different battle. And there are so many obstacles to farming, and we get very little support politically and from the general public. The general public, all you people in here tonight, are all keen on farming. You're keen on food. You like the exercise. You like running in the countryside. You like cycling. You like doing all outdoor pursuits. Farmers create the environment that you enjoy.
Yeah.
We create the food that is so essential for our every waking moment. If you do not eat, you cannot go and do the pursuits you want to do. You have no career. And my colleague Matthew, he highlighted the problems in Russia. Well, they are not alone. A billion people in the world are suffering from malnutrition. 1 billion people of 8.2 billion. That is an incredible amount in this day and age. There is no number of farmers that can produce more food so quickly to get these billion people out of poverty and malnutrition. However, on the other side of the pendulum, there's 1 billion people who are obese. So they are eating far more than they actually need. So what is happening? Why is something not being done? It's the transportation of food. It's not necessarily anything to do with the number of farmers. The number of farmers are there. They will dwindle or increase depending on economic factors that will increase their returns and their optimism of the future. We have seen a dearth of young people leave the industry, but they are now selling machinery, they are now becoming scientific advisors, they are accountants, they are business development officers, they are involved in politics, they want to make a difference. Farming is all through, coursing through our veins. You cannot ignore it. The number of farmers we are restricting here today, tonight, is the farmers that produce your food. I put it to you, there is more than that in farmers in society. However, I am a farmer, I produce food, and I got opportunities to buy more land, we bought more land, we expanded, we took a financial risk, it happened to work out. It doesn't happen to everyone to work out. You can be wiped out within a year when you actually have these start-up farms which quite frankly are just full of optimism, and it seems the right thing to do. Give a young entrant, new entrant, finance and an opportunity farm, and it's say 200 acres. Now 200 acres 50 years ago, whoa, fantastic, we can do anything we want. 200 acres is economic. 1,000 acres now is what you need. So you're done away with 5 farmers straight away just because of sheer economics, not for anything else. There are more farmers today wanting to farm than land available to farm. So it is a sad reflection when you cannot achieve your life's ambition. So I am more than delighted to have had my life involved in farming. I've met so many interesting people throughout the world. I did a lot of conversations trying to persuade Brussels and all these people to support Scottish farming. And Brussels works in a almost a total encapsulating way by getting like-minded people together. But sadly, if your own government is not wanting to get involved on the system that is in Brussels where they match fund, so our Treasury is never willing to spend a penny that they are not forced to do. And we have been talking for the last 30 years trying to get that to change. It hasn't changed yet. So I have to say that, time-wise?
20 seconds.
Okay, thank you. So there are many tales just like that. It's getting support, it's getting the net zero is a scientific function of reality, it's efficiency. And Eli said just that. It is efficiency that matters in farming, and anything we do, spend less time, make better use of it. So, thank you.
Speaker Matthew to conclude the debate for opposition. Hear, hear. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to be well within that 5 minutes. So, I would like to congratulate the speakers opposite. It was a fantastic debate, and no doubt they'll have an excellent summation. I personally thought that the debate was broken into kind of 4 main segments. So that's food security and the environment. So I'll start off with that. There seemed to be this idea from the proposition, which is fantastic, that more farmers will equal more food. It does not equal more land. I felt this was dealt with by the opposition. So we need to get away from that the food security issue will be tackled by having more farmers, having more John and Matthews. And it won't happen because, as was put by the floor so ably, we'll be less efficient. There'll be more accountants, more lawyers to pay, and because we're paying for accountants and lawyers, more of us paying for that, there's less money to pay for vets. There was a dairy down in Lincolnshire that was knocked back, 8,100 cows. They were going to have 3 full-time on-site vets. Some of the poorest animal welfare I've seen, and this is the exception, not the rule, has come because the farmer cannot afford to pay for the vets. Larger businesses can afford to do this because they have economies of scale and efficiencies. Culture. And also in the environment, we can be better to the environment. I can guarantee you that our farm is more environmentally friendly now with what we're imposing than what it was in my grandfather's day when he was ripping out hedges. We can do that because we have the money to set aside to do that because we are bigger. This does not come from being a smaller farmer. In the culture, this was a really important theme. Farmers without successors were brought up. Excellent point, very valid. I can directly say that we do not need more farmers in that. What we need is a Scottish land matching service, and when I was chair of the Next Gen group at the NFUS, we actively encouraged the Scottish land matching service for these farmers without successors who still had an affinity with the land to bring new blood or contract farm, joint ventures, so that this land can still be farmed, but it was being farmed in an efficient manner. Great theme. Why would you go into farming? We've heard tonight. No, it's a genuine question. It's one of the worst pay, longest hours, and the worst mental health. Why would you want more people to go into that? That beggars belief. And I'm going to use my own farm as an example as culture. So I actually employ more people now running the farm than my father did 15 years ago. We've got 7 full-time employees, we used to have 2. I've done that by expanding. I've brought more community to that farm, along with my team. We've built houses, we've rehoused people on our farm, and that's by expanding over the years. If I had more competition for that land, would they have done the same? Would they have brought in as much? You know, the Chickens employs 4 brand new full-time people over a very small amount of land. I did that because we had the resources there to build it. Farm hands is what we need. Everything. We need more people in agriculture. We do not need more farmers. Food is expensive. This didn't come up tonight. Food is very expensive. I think we just spend less in the US as a percentage of the basket. But more farmers means smaller farms. Price of food goes up. I produce food not for the 2% of people who buy from farm shops. I produce food for the people who don't have the time to go to the farm shop, who don't have the money to go to the farm shop. I produce food for the majority of the people within this country, and that comes with economies of scale, bigger farms, less farmers. Then we had the retailer processor power imbalance. I'm aware of time, so I won't go into this, but the long and short of it is the bigger you are, the more power you have. Okay. Now to end on a positive note. We need an image rebrand. We do not need more farmers, ladies and gentlemen. We just need more people in agriculture. And I was heartened by the comments from the floor this evening. I would love to have the best and the brightest. I'd love to have the St Andrews student union to think of agriculture as a viable career. That would be fantastic because we need you. We need the best and the brightest. And you're not going to get that at the minute with the image that farming has. We have a massive uphill challenge to feed the growing world population. As John said, there's 1 billion people in the world. We must have been at the same lecture by Dr. Food, who live below the poverty line. If we don't owe it to the people within this own country to keep food safe and affordable, we owe it to the 1 billion people within the world who genuinely live below the poverty line. We should be a big exporting country as well as being self-sufficient in our own, and that comes with, as we've said, economies of scale. We're glad to report that we do precision farming. We do all of that because we have the resources to put into it, and we didn't 10-15 years ago when we were a much smaller farm. So for those reasons put forward by myself and my able poet John colleague here, I beg you to oppose. Thank you.
So now we cross back over to the proposition. Have you decided how you'll be spending your time this evening?
5 and 5, please.
5 and 5, wonderful. You're speaking first, wonderful. So I'd like to invite once again Wendy Chamberlain to start concluding the debate as a whole on the proposition side. Hear, hear.
I'll briefly follow my colleague David in just paying tribute to Alex Salmond. He was obviously a student at this university, and indeed Jamie Stone, my Liberal Democrat colleague for Caithness, Sutherland and Easter Ross, showed me a picture this week of him, Alex Salmond and Desmond Swain here at university in a group of students, not necessarily a collective of politicians you would expect to see being friendly with one another. I think that was my personal alarm going off, or either its batteries run out. Hopefully it's the latter. If you hear somebody speaking out my bag, that is what it is. I think this has been, in the spirit, an excellent debate, and I feel that our dividing lines are false in some regards, because actually there is so much that we agree on, and I think it's very encouraging how much it's quite clear that both the floor and all the speakers value farming. John is right, they create our natural environment, and we should be more grateful to them, frankly. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points, because obviously my argument is that we do need more farmers, but I think we can potentially come to a compromise that we do definitely need more people. And that is just a number of slight contradictions I felt were made in the opposition's page. And I'll make no comments on the poem talking about politicians in the way that but you know, the statistic that by 2030 we'll have 20% less farmers, that struck me as, is this a good thing? Is this something we could welcome because of the economies of scale that we're referenced to? Or actually is that something we should mourn and actually makes our food security more difficult to deliver? And I think the debate around land use and land matching, which I think is an excellent idea, and land availability is a critical one. It's quite clear that we need to think about the ways that we best use our land, but I think one of the arguments that the opposition seemed to make was that if more land was available, there could and should be more farmers in order to secure our food security. And so that is certainly something that I would argue from a proposition perspective strengthens our argument. We've obviously ended up by agreeing that farmers for the context of this evening are those that are owned and managed, but there are quite clearly those across the industry in a variety of roles that provide support. We need to produce more food. The nature of farming is going to change. The owned and managed, I hope, continue because they are part of our rural communities, but vertical farming, etc., will be part of it. We should define those as farmers too, and those technologies. And I would say in genetic modification, obviously there was legislation in the last Parliament in the UK, but the Scottish Government have not progressed that, even though the EU have moved in the same direction of the rest of the UK, and I hope they revisit it. Because if we're looking at economies of scale, if we're looking at better ways of producing food, we need to ensure that we are considering the right things to do that are good for our natural environment as well, if we make the right decisions. I just want to finally talk about the issue around obesity, and that probably brings me back round to food banks again, which seems a bit of a strange thing to do, but I remember being in Blackpool and visiting a food bank down there where they had something called kettle packs, which is basically because they have people who have no access to any cooking facilities other than a kettle, and that is therefore the emergency food that they are given. That food is not of the quality that any of us would want to see, and then it's not surprising that those people are not well enough to find work or do things, because none of us would be particularly well on that diet. But I think in terms of obesity, it comes to me around quality of food. And I do genuinely believe that there is a market. It might be small, but I think there is an expectation, an increasing expectation from consumers around the quality of our food and the variety of our food. And as a result of that, I think there is still a place for farming, there is still a place for more farmers, and I urge you to support the proposition.
The final speaker this evening, David Bean, to conclude the debate as a whole. Hear, hear.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, I agree with everyone who's spoken so far that this has been an excellent debate, and it's been one in which there has been a great deal of accord between the two sides of the House, and I hope that when you all come to vote this evening, it won't be with a spirit of rancour against the side that you're voting against, but more one of having assessed the intellectual cases on both sides and having drawn an intellectual conclusion. And this being St Andrews, I have absolutely no doubt that that is what each and every one of you will do.
Yeah.
But that said, I am in a debate, and so I have to sum up for the side that I'm on. And I think it's very clear to me that there is one effectively dividing line here in this debate. Everyone agrees that food production is a good thing. Everyone agrees that we in the United Kingdom, we in Scotland, probably ought to be looking to produce more food. The question is, how do we do it? And which side of this debate has most effectively addressed why our arguments tend towards that objective the best? Effectively, the opposition has tried to characterise the proposition's case as being one of saying, well, let's just ignore all other factors. As long as we've got more farmers, we will get more food production. Whereas they've been talking about other things. They've been talking about means of efficiency, means of raising the productivity of land. Now, I would like to suggest, Madam Speaker, that their characterisation of our case is somewhat simplistic, because that's not actually all that we're saying. We have highlighted some problems with the bare notion of saying, let's have fewer farmers, but just do everything that we can to increase the productivity of a farm. And I think that there were two floor speeches that kind of quite excellently highlighted the problem with that, as I would call it, a mischaracterization of our case. The first was from the lady on the benches to my right, hailing from the United States of America, who talked about the monopolization that has come to exist in the farming sector in that country and why it has caused problems. And that is an outcome of a situation where a country has said collectively, we don't need so many farmers. And then, you know, a point that was addressed against us was from the lady on the board of 10, who said that arguing for more farmers would not necessarily be productive, because those additional farmers would just still be doing bad things, doing things that we disagree with. Well, I would say against that the farming sector is already heavily regulated, and in fact government farming support schemes are offering a great deal more money for the environment. Now, my learned opponent said that one great solution would be to introduce a land matching service to address situations where there isn't a clear succession plan for a farm. I would absolutely agree with that. But the thing is, what that service would be doing would be attracting more farmers. That is ultimately what we on the proposition have been saying all evening. In effect, there will be a degree of churn within the farming sector, which means that at no point will we reach the stage where, if we want to maintain the skills, the productivity of our agricultural land and our food and farming sector, is it reasonable to say we can get by with fewer or just a static number of farmers? Because farmers aren't static, they grow old, they retire. We will always need more farmers, and we do today. And for that reason, fundamentally, Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I beg to propose this motion.
Speaker, and to all of our speakers for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here this evening. We hugely appreciate your attendance, and you've all spoken brilliantly, so thank you for what has been a really wonderful debate. That being said, now it's time to call the House to vote. So if you side with the proposition, i.e. you agree that we do believe that we do need more farmers, please raise your hands now.
I think we're stuffed. This is normal for me.
And all those against who side with the opposition.
Very clearly.
And any abstentions?
Liberals!
Okay. Wonderful. So, before we announce who has won the debate this evening, we have a couple of things that we need to do. So, I would like to call on board for board announcements from the board of 10. If I can squeeze board one more time into a sentence, I'll be doing really well this evening. So, we'll call on Alex, Chair of Ways and Means.
Yep. Big thanks to our 4 speakers for coming here tonight. Lovely debate. And I hope all of you have a wonderful independent learning week coming next week, where we will not have a debate. Yeah, I know. But we will all come back here week 7, hopefully in a room fuller than this, fully rested, with fewer deadlines. Almost, one can hope, Parth. To debate the motion, this House supports nuclear power. So this should be a good one. Come along. Yeah. And the schedule for motions for next semester will soon be announced.
Thank you to Alex. Okay, we'll go to Jack, who's standing for Chief Whip this evening.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'd like to note that I did not get an applause like Alex. I would also like to invite everyone who is here tonight and who would like to learn to debate, as well as these speakers tonight, to come to our regular weekly Wednesday trainings. They happen at 2 p.m. on the top floor of the Union on Wednesdays. I would also like to note that, unlike public debate, competitive never rests. So we have training next week as well. Not at our usual time, but we'll have our training session at 4 p.m. on Friday afternoon in preparation for an upcoming competition. But anyone is free to attend. We'll have pizza. It'll be very social. It'll be very fun. Please come along if you're staying in town and you've got nothing to do over reading week. That'll be great to see you there. I'd also like to note that we have upcoming competitions. So we have Bogle coming up at the end of reading week on the 26th on the Saturday. And if you want to come along to judge, to help set up, if you're interested in speaking at that or any other future competitions, please come speak to me or any other member of Competitive Subcom. Yeah, I think that's everything.
Okay, wonderful. And then finally to Ariel, steward to the House.
Thank you all for a lovely debate on a topic so dear to my heart. Now, if you would like to come and socialise and talk about farming with me or anything else, welcome to pick another topic. We have our weekly social at Picken Bar in the Union after this debate. I'd also like to thank you all for a successful pub crawl last week and to keep an eye out for more socials to come. Thank you.
Some of us were robbed at the pub crawl, just saying.
Don't get resigned. Don't be bitter. Don't be bitter, get better.
Okay, wonderful. So if you'll indulge me for just a moment as a final announcement for board, just for myself. So we have been, as a debating society, we've been working tirelessly over the past sort of 5, but really 6 weeks, including Freshers Week, to create events for you. We're incredibly proactive as a society. We have 3 recurring events that we do every single week, including the event that you're at this evening. And I would just like to personally thank all of my new and existing board members for all of their contributions in the past 6 weeks. We've all done a fantabulous? Why not? It's a fantabulous job that we've all done, okay? It's been wonderful with the schools, with St Leonard's, that was Abby and Lawrence, all of the work that Ariel's been putting in to make sure that the ball happens, which is going to be more on that later on. To our new members of board, to our freshers rep Mia, to our new clicky photo media officers, the wonderful Jamie, to Matilda who's been working as D&I, to Jack and Parth and Neva who's absent this evening, for everything that you've been doing for competitive subcommittee, and lastly to, but not very much not least, to Alex and Inez and Beata, who's unfortunately not here this evening, to thank you all very much for the work you've been putting into public, and for Lewis for taking minutes as well. I think that's everybody.
And Jenny for being an
Two things that are left to do is one, to announce the best floor speech prize this evening. So Inez have decided that after I think probably the 6th floor speech they've given in Parliament Hall this semester, we've decided to give the floor speech prize to Thenu, so congratulations. And then finally for the numbers for this evening, so the ayes to the right 8 and the nays to the left 22 with 6 abstentions. So the nays have it, the nays have it. Joining us to see you all after reading week.
I think your skills, knowledge and